And I wonder, what would it be like when he grows up if instead of telling him about my grandmother, I could actually introduce him to some digital version of her? Or what if we were to find out that she left messages for him to be emailed to him on each of his birthdays until he turns 50, sharing with him her insights about life, love, happiness? What impact would that have on our family? Very interesting possibilities. But I want to start with reminding us how old such concerns and fantasies actually are by doing this and this. So since their dawn, communication technologies have been associated with death. And this is due to how each technology for communication that emerged, such as photography, telegraph, radio, has repeatedly triggered our ways of being present and being absent. In so doing, they've also contributed to how we negotiate our relationship with death and the dead. And that's because our relationship with death and the dead is so closely linked to notions of presence and absence. Think about photography. As so many scholars have discussed, photography has been associated with death since its inception. This is mainly due to the stillness that characterizes it. A person appearing on a photograph is eternally motionless and soundless, thus infusing all photographs with connotations of death. Now, these connotations of death are also related to the very essence of the photograph, because think about what photography does. Photography freezes a fleeting moment in time and makes it eternal, thus making it both present and absent at once. This very cute photograph of me blowing out the candles at my 4th birthday party only exists because I was actually there blowing out those candles. And someone was there with me to take that photograph. But at that very instance, as soon as that photograph was taken, that moment has ceased to exist. And so this photograph today is an indication both of the actual existence and life and presence of that moment, as well as its disappearance and its death. And in fact, early practices of photography were dedicated to memento mori photography. This is the photographing of individuals at their deathbed. And for many, that occasion was the first and last photograph they had taken of them. So each new technology for communication has repeatedly triggered our ways of being present and being absent. And with the emergence of electronic media, they also have repeatedly triggered fantasies and anxieties about the presence of the dead in our lives and our possibility to communicate with them. And the telegraph makes a really interesting example for that. First used in 1844, the telegraph was the first electronic medium to enable instant communication at a distance. Can you imagine? Just as we are today, enchanted by smartphones and tablets and the internet, people in the late 19th century were enchanted by this new technology that for the first time in the history of humanity enabled to get instant input about the thoughts, ideas, experiences of someone who was completely physically absent, someone who was far, far away. For the first time, two distant minds could communicate instantly at a distance. Now, as historians have shown, this idea, this possibility to communicate at a distance was a historical inspiration to the movement of modern spiritualism, which emerged at around the same time. Spiritualists were drawing a parallel between the technology and the logic behind the telegraph. So just as the telegraph could provide a channel to communicate with the absent minds of those living, spiritualists believed that spiritualist mediums could provide a channel to instantly communicate with the minds, the absent minds of those deceased. And many scientists were inspired both by the technology of the telegraph as well as by spiritualist belief, joined modern spiritualism and tried to build the machine that would enable to communicate with the world of the dead. Now, later electronic media as well have again challenged and facilitated additional ways for being present and absent, and have also triggered their own versions of such fantasies and anxieties about communicating with the dead with the technology of the time. And digital media make no exception. So with digital media, we've also established additional ways of being present and being absent. And in recent years, there is growing interest, both academically and popular, growing interest in how digital media is being incorporated by individuals in their relationship with death and the dead. And the possibility that we could use digital media to interact with deceased loved ones has inspired our collective imagination. And this is best seen in popular TV dramas and big-budget movies that we've all seen that have brought this idea to life. For example, a famous movie from 2014 depicts a scientist who researches artificial intelligence. Sadly, he's poisoned, so naturally his colleagues upload his mind onto a computer. And then after he dies, they're able to bring him back to life digitally. I won't tell you how it ends, but it is a dystopian science fiction movie. So we can imagine that things go very, very wrong. Now, what if I told you that this technology already exists? What if I told you that when you go home today, you actually can start uploading your mind onto a computer and start planning how you want to be present online and active online after you die? So this unease that we're feeling and that some of the sounds that I'm hearing is why, although science fiction is important and useful in inspiring us and in gaining an entry point to the popular imagination, we also need social science. Because the thing is that technology in real life is hardly ever all wonderful or all terrible. And as social scientists have shown, we know that technology is not something that happens to a society, but something that is constructed within it. And technological innovation is shaped both by science and society, and therefore we carry the values, ideas, and ideologies of the time. So with social science, we'd be able to grasp the nuanced and exciting variety of the technologies actually out there, and to gain an understanding of how individuals are actually using and experiencing these technologies. So now is probably a good time to give you a few examples. So just to make clear, I'm not affiliated with any of the websites. These are some of the websites that I'm researching. And they offer different ways and different services for planning your online postmortem presence. For instance, LifeNot is a very interesting platform that uses artificial intelligence. They experiment with and explore the possibility of uploading your mind onto a computer. So once you go on the LifeNot website, you open a profile, and then you can start working on what they call a mind file. And then they create a digital version of you, which is kind of like a chatbot. And then the more information you give to it, and the more you train that chatbot with examples to his answers that you might give to questions, the better will it represent the likeness of you and then interact on your behalf now or in perpetuity. Another kind of service is services that are based on pre-creating messages, either using photo or text or video, and then scheduling a time after your death in which you would like this message to be sent to specific recipients. So if there's a special occasion that is important to you and to the other person, like a birthday or some other event. So Dead Social, for instance, is such a service. And Dead Social enables you to create messages that are later posted to Facebook profiles and Twitter accounts of people that you specify. So if you have this really funny photograph of you and a friend, then you can choose a date in which you want to send this photograph to your friend's Facebook. And then maybe on her birthday at some point after you die, she will get that photograph and remember how special that moment that you shared was. Now, speaking to one of the participants in my research, he used one of these services, and he created several messages, video messages for his loved ones. And I asked him about that experience. And he said that that moment of creating those messages was a really intense, positive, and meaningful experience. He said that moment, after you've decided who you want to leave messages to, and after you've considered your every single word, and you chose the right time of day, and you chose the room in which you'd feel comfortable to do it, and then you sit down and you say all those things, was such a unique and special experience. And moreover, he said, recording those messages had an impact on his relationship with those people afterwards. So he felt that he was seeing people in a different light. And this was very interesting and very inspiring to me because it was so different from how people usually react when I tell them about my research. Yeah, people really think it's creepy. And one of the reasons why I think many of us find it creepy when we first hear about these services is related to the contradiction between how the dead would be present online through the services and the social construction of death during modernity. So to put it simply, sending emails posting on Facebook, tweeting on Twitter, is probably one of the last things that we expect dead people to be doing. But moreover, sending emails, posting on Facebook, and tweeting on Twitter is what we do. And if you think about it, there is very little to distinguish between a Facebook post or a message that is created by someone alive or someone deceased. And if you think about how we are present online, we'll already have this experience of being continuously present while being absent. And potentially, by using these services, the dead could be present online in the same spaces that we are using in our everyday, without being in any way distinct or separated. And this is what contradicts the social construction of death during modernity, because in recent decades, Western societies have established practices that were dedicated to separating and excluding death and the dead from everyday life. Places such as a cemetery were meant to contain and limit the time, space, and form of the presence of the dead in our life. And potentially, by using these services, the dead could challenge those practices of distinguishing and separating the dead from everyday life. And this is what causes that creepiness, this inability to distinguish between something that is created by someone alive and something created by someone who is dead, and this return of the familiar to where it's not expected, to where it shouldn't be, that causes this unease and perhaps anxiety. But the thing is that we're already dealing with this challenge today. Because already people who are dying are leaving their digital remains behind them for us to interact with. Each one of us has a digital footprint, which is the accumulation of our online activity that remains out there for people to see, for people to interact with. And that uncanny encounter with the digital remains of someone who has passed away is becoming a very common experience. How many of you here today have had the experience of coming across a Facebook profile of someone you know who has passed away, or a Twitter account? Quite a few, yeah, more than I thought. So if this is the case, it might be worth thinking about how we want to manage this challenge. Now, many of us might feel more comfortable with contributing to and engaging with services that enable you to completely delete your online identity after you die to its complete annihilation. But some of us might also be curious and interested in reflecting and thinking about the possibilities of controlling and managing how you do want to be present and active online after you die. And then there are many questions and many possibilities that we can think about. So going back to where I started, what would it be like if we could introduce people in our lives to deceased loved ones who have passed away but mattered greatly to us? Or how about other applications? Could this be a therapeutic tool? Could individuals dealing with their end of life find some kind of comfort or reassurance, knowing that they're going to be there digitally for their loved ones and that they're not going to leave anything unsaid? How about education? Maybe our great-great-great-grandchildren during their history classes could interview a digital Barack Obama about his experience as the President of the United States. Will having deceased individuals interacting with us through online communication have an impact on how we deal with and think about our very own mortality? Will it have an impact on how we think about and how we experience online communication? Maybe. So as these new technologies are still emerging, we all have the opportunity to be part of how they're shaped. And although they're new, we'd actually be engaging with ideas that are as old, at least, as photography. And who knows, perhaps by the time my son is old enough to understand and use these technologies, communicating to a deceased person online would be as everyday and common as open a family photo album. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Paula Kiel. Can I have another round of applause, please, for Paula? Thank you, and another huge, huge round of applause, please, to our fabulous host, Niall Hunt, please. Great. Thanks. Don't you worry, we still have plenty more excitement to come. I know you're all itching to get to the free wine, so I'll make this very, very brief. We've got another treat